I am representing a local group of people. We are calling ourselves Save Our Susquehanna, which you will see why in just a moment. We are trying to raise awareness about exactly all the stuff that Vina just talked about the proposed Encina advanced recycling plant. The plant is proposed to be built along the Susquehanna River in Point Township in central Pennsylvania. It's going to process 450,000 tons of post-consumer plastic every year. They're saying it's going to do mostly the number 3 to number 7 plastics that are harder to recycle. And then they're going to use a catalytic pyrolysis process so that thermal heating of plastic in the presence of a proprietary catalyst. And they hide behind that proprietary word all the time to not tell us a lot of things all the time. And then they're going to take the pyrolysis oil from that process and fractionate it into chemicals, benzene, toluene, xylene, and propylene, which are volatile organic chemicals, ship them along the river to customers who will make more plastic from it. And so they're saying that this is going to be a circular process. I just want to, at this point, just tell you that this is going to be along the Susquehanna River. The Susquehanna River, the North Branch along where this plant was going to be, was Pennsylvania's River of the Year this year. This river is central to our whole life in rural Pennsylvania. We drink from this river, we boat on this river, we fish from it. It's everything to us. It characterizes our whole area. The plant, the company's name is Encina. They're from Texas. They say that the plant will be a $1.1 billion plant to build, and there's going to be 300 full-time jobs. For some time, they were saying with an average salary of $75,000 a year. But we started to kind of say, well, so if somebody makes, $5 million and the rest of the people make 30,000, isn't that an average of 75,000? So they stopped saying that, and we're not sure about the 300 jobs. That has changed from 75 to 300 to more or less over the year and a half that we've been aware of this plant. They have no record of success with a similar plant. They say that they have a pilot plant in San Antonio, Texas. We have found no evidence of that. There's no air permit for a similar smaller plant. From what we can tell, it's a series of laboratories that do parts of the process, but none of them do the entire process altogether. So this would be the first plant of its kind. As far as we can tell, the funding is not in place yet for this plant. They say it's going to be $1 billion plant. We've looked into the funding. As far as we can tell, they have about $55 million. And this is a concern because one of the things that characterizes these plants, which Vina didn't really go into, is that they rely on money, subsidies, tax breaks, and things from government. So from local government or from state government, often these plants rely on this kind of money. So they do have one local group one local kind of benefit, which is that the local development entity called Drive has bought the land. It's a 100-acre piece of land. They paid $4.5 million for it, and they're currently leasing it to the company for $28,000 a month. And I already mentioned the part about the tax breaks. As far as we can tell, they don't have other tax breaks that they're getting. The plant is going to be built in 2 phases. The first phase is washing and sorting. So just bringing in all the plastic, washing it with 2.9 million gallons of water per day from our river, washing and sorting it into the different numbers, getting rid of all of the gunk that comes in with post-consumer plastic, all the labels, everything, all that stuff. And then it goes into the phase 2, which is the big bad, the catalytic pyrolysis, right? And this is where it'll be melted, and then the pyrolysis oil will be created, and all of the air pollution will come, and then they'll be vaporizing that to make the benzene and the toluene and xylene and so forth. The water is going to be processed on site as waste and then put back into the river. The company says that they will, they're contracting with a company called Veolia, which has a kind of a bad track record for what this kind of wastewater treatment. But even if they follow the letter of the law and they do everything they should, the law right now does not require them to remove forever chemicals, so PFAS chemicals, or microplastic from the water that they use in washing and sorting the plastic. So those things could go back into the river. Although the company does claim that the water will be cleaner than when they got it out. The concerns of our group, the Save Our Susquehanna group, are that the site is actually in the 100-year floodplain of the Susquehanna River. And people in our area, what we say is it's not, if the river will flood, but when it floods. And it's a very shallow river, so the impacts of water pollution will be significant on the river. The impacts of the heating up of the water before they discharge it back into the river will be significant on the river. And if you've been paying attention to the climate crisis, which I know you all have, 100-year floodplain was defined some time ago, and it is no longer the 100-year floodplain. It's the 50-year floodplain or the 5-year floodplain. We just don't know, but we do know that it will flood. We're concerned about air pollution from the vaporization of the plastics, from burning of natural gas or other fuels to power the process, emissions from flaring. I mentioned water pollution already. Many people in our local area are concerned about traffic, 100 trucks per day, so one every 5 minutes full of post-consumer plastic waste. That's 100 trucks going in and 100 trucks coming back out. In an area that's very rural, very small, we already have traffic problems at the 2 intersections where the trucks would be going through. We're concerned about light and noise pollution. There's a neighborhood right across the street from this site. You can see these 2 images. The top one is the shell cracker plant, what they said it would look like in Western Pennsylvania. The bottom is, of course, what it does look like now that it's built. So these are just the kind of things that we can expect from building this kind of refinery in a rural area. We're concerned about the toxic chemicals being stored on the site, flood and fire and leaks, and transportation of those by rail along our river. We're concerned about flooding along the river that could potentially cause problems with the rail lines. These rail lines have been around for a long time. They're not often used, and so they're not in good repair. So it's very easy to imagine a derailment along the river with a tank car full of benzene, 32,000 gallons or something of benzene from this process. Other concerns that we have are things that Vina sort of alluded to, that the messaging has been changing for these plants. So when we first heard about it, they were calling the process vaporization. And then when I met with them later, they said, we never said vaporization, it's catalytic pyrolysis. And then they've also called it melting. So this concerns us because if you're building a $1 billion plant that does a chemistry process, you should know what that process is. We're concerned that phase 1 has already received an exemption as an advanced recycling plant, so that's classified as a manufacturing plant, which has lower requirements in terms of regulations. But the phase 1 part isn't even the advanced recycling part, and they've already got the exemption. Clean Air Council tried to appeal that, but they lost that appeal. And we're also concerned that they've split it into two phases because the first one, the washing and sorting, sounds like a more benign process. And once that's built, how are we going to say no to phase two, right? So we think that phase one is a Trojan horse for phase two. And I mentioned the concerns we have about the pilot plant that's not operational. We have no data on from the like a proposed air permit there on what might be coming out of this plant. And no one else has been able to do this, as Vina mentioned, without generating tons of hazardous waste. They haven't mentioned that at all.